Ever experienced a moment so creepy it still makes your skin crawl? In today's video, we're sharing real stories of eerie encounters and chilling experiences that will linger in your mind long after the video ends. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your creepiest story in the comments. When I was in college, I came home for Thanksgiving break. I was sleeping late, around 10 a.m., and I heard my bedroom door open. I rolled over to see who it was, and I didn't recognize the woman staring at me. I blinked to try to focus my vision a little more. The woman quietly closed the door. I lay there for a few moments, confused and disoriented. Then I got out of bed to check the house. Nothing was out of place. The laptop was on the kitchen table, and our new puppy was in her crate, lying quietly. I saw some serving dishes on our back porch. I called my mom at work to ask her if someone in the family was dropping something off for Thanksgiving later that week. She said yes, my great aunt, but the woman I saw was younger, had probably left the stuff on the back deck. My mom told me I probably was dreaming. Everyone teased me at Thanksgiving when I retold the story. The day after Thanksgiving, my uncle called my mom and told her to look at the paper. There was a local story about a woman who was arrested in my neighborhood earlier that week for breaking and entering. Apparently, she had been knocking on doors, and when people didn't answer, she would enter the home to look for money. I did not answer because I was sleeping, so she assumed the house was empty. Later, I had to call the police and give a statement, and they asked me to describe who I saw: young, blonde hair. They informed me my description matched. I used to go take pictures of trains and alligators at this one pond. The pond was behind a big vacant warehouse complex on one side and woods on the other. There was only one road to get back there. Pretty desolate. I'd go there almost every day and never got worried or messed with. Felt pretty safe. I should mention I'm a petite female and was in my 20s at the time. And always alone. One day I'm out there, and a white van with no back windows pulls up. The driver starts yelling at me, waving me over. He doesn't speak English well, so I was confused with what he was saying. I walk a bit closer to the van. He's asking me for directions to somewhere, and I tell him I don't know. There's a guardrail between us. He keeps telling me he can't hear me and maybe to jump the guardrail to get closer. He would every once in a while look towards the back of the van. That's when I felt this wasn't safe. I start walking away backwards, pretty much telling the guy to get fucked. That's when the sliding van door opened and another guy popped out towards me. I haul us towards the woods. Right when I got to the wood line, there was a sketchy looking man there. I shat a brick thinking I'd been trapped. Instead, this badass dude comes out of the woods yelling and charging at the guys in the van. They didn't run after me but were still parked by my car, standing outside their van. Once they saw him, they booked it. The man who saved me was named Bill. He lived in the woods. He told me he saw me out there almost every day. I felt pretty stupid for never feeling like someone was watching me, and got a kick out of a little girl taking pics of gators and trains. We became good buddies. I'd bring him food and beer most nights, and we'd just watch gators and trains and talk. He was an extremely intelligent man that lived a wild life. During our last talk he was more sentimental than usual. The next time I came by the pond with his sub and beer, he wasn't there. His camp was, but he wasn't. I'd given him a picture of the pond with a big alligator sunbathing by the trains that he loved. That was gone too. Never saw him again. I imagine he hopped a train to find where it all ends, like he'd say. I hope he found what he was looking for. One day sewing needles just showed up on my porch. I've got 2 toddlers, so when I first saw one, I was alarmed, like, how'd that get here? We don't sew, and we lived a good distance from any other house. The next day I found 2 more, but this time inside my house right after you'd walked inside the door. Super weirded out again but threw them away and carried on. As time passed, I'd find another, then like 5 at a time, then one day I opened my front door to like 30 on my porch scattered everywhere. I was on my hands and knees every morning for a week by my front door trying to make sure there weren't any my kids would step on, and every time I looked, I'd find about 3 to 5 needles. It was the oddest thing. It went on for about 8 or so days where I'd clean up everyone I could find, and while doing something the next day, I'd inevitably catch one out of the corner of my eye, which led to another and another. It was so many needles by the end of it. I never found out how those needles were ending up on my porch or doorway. I did move, though. Edit to add, I had tried to convince myself a neighbor might have dropped some, but we had brick walls between houses as well, so they'd have had to fly over a wall to land on my porch, and they were only on the porch, none in my long driveway between my neighbor's brick wall and my porch, just specifically on the porch, and the few that were inside. It really was just so bizarre, and I guess they probably would have all shown up at the same time if they were blown over by the wind. I'm not sure, but I really have no clue how they would have ended up there. My house was set far back from the street and very spaced out from my neighbors, and, like I said, the brick walls between made it more difficult. This started when we moved into the country into a trailer park like 9 to 10 years ago. We moved into this super broken down trailer that honestly probably should have been condemned, but we got evicted from our last house, and we only could afford this trailer because my dad agreed to fix it up and also be a maintenance man for the park and fix what stuff he could. Anyways, I had a girlfriend, but she lived in town, so we couldn't hang out every day, so at night we'd be on the phone every night for like 2 hours. We didn't have internet for around a year after moving there because we were dirt poor, so I didn't have anything to watch really at night, so I just turned everything off and tried to sleep. For some reason I'd fall asleep and then wake up exactly an hour later. It started off just kind of annoying, and I didn't know why, but then that turned into something much weirder. It started to feel like something was in my room watching me. It was unnerving at first, but then it got real bad. Sometimes I just got that really intense feeling that something sinister was in my room staring at me. It got so bad sometimes I had to get up and turn all my lights on, and on a couple of occasions I sprinted out of my room and went into my bathroom and stayed in there for like 15 minutes, and then went back in, and it would take me an hour or so to fall back asleep. The worst it ever got, though, was when I was facing towards my wall, and this feeling was so bad and it would not go away, but I just couldn't bring myself to turn over, when all of a sudden, I shit you not, I felt my blanket lift up slightly, and I could feel the sensation of someone or something getting into my bed next to me. This was the most unnerving feeling I have ever gotten, and it still gives me goosebumps thinking about it. This went on for, like, 7 years consistently, multiple times a week sometimes. We got a brand new trailer a couple of years ago, and I think it's only happened once since, because I have a screensaver on my Roku so it's not completely dark. I still haven't been able to explain it. At first I chalked it up to my mind playing tricks on me, but then it became so consistent that it just didn't make sense for it to fit that explanation. Like I said, I don't believe in the paranormal, but this is the first time I have ever felt anything that felt actually sinister. Creepiest and most calming. It wasn't long after my daughter died, maybe a few weeks. I took a walk in the middle of the night and went to the cemetery up around the corner. She isn't buried there. I just went. Planned on maybe killing myself that night. I have no idea. I was walking up the path to the stairs, and this old drifter-looking guy started kind of following me. I figured, I'm going to die anyway, whatever. But I wasn't scared or on edge like I'd usually be. Even though it was a dead end. I sat on the steps and lit a cigarette. He approached and asked for a cigarette. I gave him one. He asked if he could sit next to me. I said, sure. Not sure why I did any of this. I'm usually very leery of people, especially strange males. I never felt scared or nervous. He just sat in silence with me for a few minutes, then started talking and asking questions. We talked about my daughter for a while. It could have been 30 or 90 minutes. I have no idea. We sat and chain smoked. I remember him very distinctly, but at the same time, I don't. He had a backpack and a tank top and shorts on in fall. That's unusual in my area. It's too cold, and we don't get drifters, especially this far off of the highway. He finished his last cigarette, asked me if I was okay now, and asked if I was going to walk back home. I said yes. He walked away and disappeared, and I walked home. That man saved my life that night. I will never forget him as long as I live, even though I never saw his face. He probably was just a random person passing through. And I hope he got where he wanted to go and everything is doing well for him. My husband and I were staying in a boutique hotel in LA on Sunset. We went to bed around midnight, and I woke up groggily because I noticed the hallway light was on, and when I opened my eyes a little more, I noticed the light was illuminating a man standing at the foot of our bed. I don't know how long he has been standing there watching us sleep. I sat up immediately and said, "What the F?" I then started screaming. My husband sat up, and the man said, "Sorry, wrong room," and ran out. I didn't want my husband to chase him because I didn't know what was in the hallway. We were so confused. We called down to the front desk and no one answered. Eventually my husband went down to the lobby to look for the guy and talk to the manager. Didn't find him. The manager said he'd looked through security footage in the time frame we mentioned and then said he didn't find him. So either the man came in earlier than we thought, or the manager was lying to save face. But lesson learned, always lock your door with that extra security latch. I used to work the closing shift at a gas station. On the side of the building were our public bathroom and a payphone. About 15 minutes before closing, some creep calls in. "I'm watching you. I'm touching myself thinking of you. That kind of stuff. The thing is, before we leave, we are supposed to check that the bathroom door is correctly closed, or else the wind might blow it open during the night and trigger the alarm system. So my thoughts were, what if he was calling from the payphone next to the bathroom door? No way I'm going over there to check it. So I called the cops. I didn't want them to do anything special, just be there so I could safely lock up everything and reach my car in safety. Police arrive, annoyed at being summoned. I explain what happened. So, what do you want us to do, exactly? One answered as if he had better things to do with his precious time. Protect and serve, motherfucker. I think to myself. So yeah. The police are creeps. I think it's creepy, but it's just dumb as hell. Living with a roommate. We get along and are friends. We were drinking a little and wanted more. Took the bus to the grocery store. I was bitching the whole way about how I wanted a cactus. I just wanted one cactus. Roommate was like, WTF, no. We're getting rum and leaving. I was pissed at him for wanting more rum. He was pissed at me for being drunk and requesting a cactus. So we decided to just get the rum and leave so we absolutely didn't miss the last bus home. I was pissed. Went to where his specific favorite rum was. They were out. On the shelf where his rum lives was instead a small cactus. We stared at each other. 20 years later he still thinks I somehow set this up. I did not. It was weird for me, too. I've had a lot of weird experiences, but probably when I was walking home from a late shift at my job when I was a fresh teenager. My home was an apartment complex across the street from a playground with a bridge over a creek leading to a school. There weren't many streetlights except over the path to the bridge, so the park itself was quite dark except for the light from the moon. As I was walking, next to the park there was this house with a wall of hedges, quite tall as well, and I thought I saw a deer beside them. When I focused on the deer, it was looking at me, and horrifyingly, what I could make out looked human. Terrifying. I was so sure of what I saw, and it made me feel pure dread. I stopped in my tracks, and it did too, and we made eye contact easily for 5 to 10 seconds, but it felt like minutes. Then, I had the courage to move, and it spooked whatever I was looking at, and what I thought was a deer ran away, but its body didn't move normally, and I noticed its tail was very long, like a golden retriever. I rushed home and immediately told my family, and my dad and older brother actually walked back to the park to see if they could find the deer. I felt so cared for because they all immediately believed me, granted I was telling them in pure fear, probably with a face that couldn't lie and showed true horror. We never found it. Crazy enough. I'm older now and diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder. What I saw felt so real, and at that time of my life I wasn't having serious hallucinations. I really believe I saw that. But now with my disorder, I wonder if it was really just my imagination all along. Boyfriend and I were staying in an old, cheap motel. I had just gotten out of the tub and was wrapped up in a towel when there was pounding on the door and some guy yelling. BF cracks open the door but has the chain lock engaged, and this dude outside is so furious he's spitting. He's yelling at me through the crack in the door and yelling, "I knew she was in here. That's my F% wife." He's got a hunting knife. I don't know this guy at all. I'm like 18 years old at the time. I'm actually trying to calmly tell this guy I'm not his wife as he's trying to force his way into our room. BF and I end up having to force the door shut with this lunatic slamming himself into the door. Once the door was shut, it went quiet. Then a minute later he's doing the same thing to the room next to ours. We hear a second guy screaming at him. Then we hear the lunatic shriek like a girl, some scuffling, another scream, then a thonk sound and broken glass. Then silence. Then we hear police sirens and people outside talking loudly. We go outside to see what the hell is going on. Turns out the guy in the next room didn't use his chain lock. Loony dude got inside maybe 2 feet. Guy threw Clorox bleach in his eyes in self-defense. Loony stumbled backwards and out of the room screaming, ended up falling over the 3rd floor railing outside, and crashed onto the hood of someone's car. The back of his head went through the windshield. After we talked to the police, we gathered our stuff and left. I was camping in the Mark Twain National Forest years ago, and I like to do dispersed camping. Had followed Forest Service roads towards what looked like, on the map, a promising river bend to camp in for the night. I went pretty deep and found the spot. It was better than expected. The river ran beneath a cool cliff, and it was a perfect flat spot to set up my tent and a fire. Climbed into my tent and read for a while. I kept thinking I heard movement on top of the cliff, and several times I thought I'd heard rocks falling down into the river, but every time I checked with my headlamp, I saw nothing. I tried to get to sleep until I finally, for sure, heard voices on the cliff. I quickly unzipped the tent, and this time I saw people on top of the cliff looking down at me. They saw me and quickly disappeared. Jumped out of my tent, hurled it into the back of my car, and got the fuck out of there. It was around 2 a.m., and I raced out of there so fast. Found a legit campsite with a lot of other people and felt safe again. It could have been locals whose spot I had taken, but I was miles and miles into the woods and hadn't seen signs of other people, no fire pits, trash, or shot up signs as shit, for a while. Could have been that I had camped close to an illegal grow field. Could have been deliverance reenactors. No idea, but I'm glad I got out. I have two. First involved a Ouija board. My family is super religious. We were getting ready to take in the daughter of my parents' friends, who was really struggling and couldn't live at home anymore. She owned a Ouija board, and my parents told her she had to get rid of it. She and her boyfriend tossed in some woods in Solano County, California. Fast forward a few months later, my mom, the girl living with us, and my sister go to a toy store in Yuba City, California. I am around 10 at the time, and I am an all over in board games, and I see a game that isn't wrapped in plastic, and it just almost feels like it is calling me. I walked away but kept going back to it. So I grab it and take it to my mom. She immediately snatches it from my hands and tells me to not touch it, and she takes it to the front counter. The clerk opens the game to see if anything is missing, and written on the back of the game was the name of the girl living with us, and the planchette was chewed on in one corner like she did. She immediately goes white. My mom literally pushed my sister and me away, and the clerk was absolutely freaked out. The other was my daughter and I watching movies in our townhouse. It's getting late, and we decide to go to bed. Around midnight, my daughter was 10 at the time, and she screams. My estranged husband was standing at the window watching us. She is 21 now and still says that was the scariest moment of her life. Honorable mention to the guy who tried to roofie me and take me from a house party. I thank God every day that my friend walked into the garage when he did and saw them trying to get me to drink the drink and get me in their car. That was the last time I ever got drunk like that again. I was 22. I was one of 6 girls who were being stalked by someone in my small town. The person got our last names from our managers. Then got our numbers from the phone book. They would call, make a comment about what you wore that day. I was often in my work uniform, the time you went into work, when you left, and how you got there. Left letters and packages at the home. Mine had been notebooks, flowers, pens, and a couple of gift cards. One gift card was for Silk and Sudie. For those not in Canada, it's a version of Victoria's Secret. We originally thought with the first 2 calls someone was pulling a prank. It was when they called a third time, my parents were out, and they said they knew I had been in the shower. The bathroom had no window to the outside that I used. We had closed in the glass enclosure years before. The bathroom is not seen from outside. They said they knew the towel color I had used, plus somehow knew I was wearing a new burgundy bathrobe my mom had purchased. Knew how long I had been in there for too. I took a longer than normal shower that day. I freaked out, called my parents at the party, and demanded they come home. My parents had me call the police. They came home with 3 of my dad's buddies who went into the backfield with the local farmer and a police officer to check for tracks. The other officer got everything down. They couldn't trace the call even with 69. Police told us the next day I was one of 6 getting the calls. We had officers driving by the house all hours of the day and night for 3 weeks. The calls then started coming into my place of work. And they realized they had been for a week before it was really noticed, too. My boss took it seriously. I had always walked to work and was on the night shift for the next 2 weeks. Now managers and supervisors picked me up and took me home. He moved me to other stores he owned in 2 other towns trying to alleviate it. The guy still called both those stores and the original, really pissed. It was a month of calls at home and work. I learned who the other girls were. We all had a connection by being similar in age. 3 went to the Catholic high school, and 3 of us went to the public school. All worked for restaurants or fast food. Otherwise, not many similarities. The RCMP got called because it baffled the local cops. The last call came in saying they were bored now, thanks for the fun, with a chilling laugh. Police later said the person was not even from our province but someone who had visited town and lived elsewhere. I was taking acting lessons around that time, and I remember my coach stated I needed to take back the night. She convinced my folks to enroll me in self-defense classes. She came with me. She was the reason I was able to start walking to work again. But I also remember that many locals became super vigilant. They would notice me walking and what shift I was on. Local firefighters, factory workers, etc., often said they realized my schedule was super easy to notice, and therefore they kept an eye on me. Perk of a small town that cares, and something I still appreciate to this day. The year before last year, around Christmas time, I think, 12 am at the time, was staying up because it had started snowing and I wanted to see it. It was around 3 am, so you already know things are about to get freaky. So some background info, I know I'm all over the place. I used to live in a townhouse in the middle, and my room was at the back of the house, where there so happened to be a huge bank with lights shining everywhere outside my window. There was also a little tree area at the left end of this backyard we shared. So as I am looking out the window, I kid you not, I saw an alien running across my backyard out of nowhere and disappear into a sewer entrance, you know, the kind that levels up off the ground and isn't on the side of the street, from that little tree area. This thing looked nothing like any other animal I had ever seen, and it was bald with nothing but a little body and 2 legs with little arms. I joke about it looking like my cousin because it was so human-like, but that thing was not human. Now whenever I try to bring it up to someone, I can see it in their eyes that they don't believe shit I'm saying or are thinking, Judah, you were probably just fucking tired, but I know what I saw. I haven't seen that thing since, and I hope I never will. My husband travels for work occasionally, and about a year and a half ago, around Christmas time, he was on one of those work trips, so I was home alone with our at the time 2-year-old. It was about 8:30 at night, and the kiddo was asleep in his bed when I heard our screen porch door open and saw a flashlight shining in it. In our apartment, the screen porch is attached to the front door and enters into the living room, where I had been sitting wrapping Christmas presents. At first, I figured my upstairs neighbors must have gotten delivery, and the driver got the door wrong because that happens all the time. I shot them a text, and they said they hadn't, and they didn't have any idea who it could be. At that point, I called my husband and asked if he had delivered something to our house, since sometimes when he's on a work trip, he'll have an evening treat delivered for me. I had a bad gut feeling, though, so at the same time, I went to the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and started checking to make sure all the windows and doors were locked. He picks up, confirms he had not, and says I should probably call the cops. As I'm about to hang up, I hear the sound of metal sliding into the lock of the door, so I walk back into the living room from the kitchen and see a man picking my lock. I scream, he looks up, sees me, and smiles. I raise the knife high enough for him to see it through the window at the top of my door, and he takes off running. I called the cops, and naturally, they couldn't find him, so I grabbed the kiddo out of bed, and we spent the night in a hotel. Somehow, he didn't wake up through all the commotion until I was putting him in his car seat. The whole ordeal lasted under 30 minutes, but it felt like hours. Several years ago I used to work at an old bar, mostly doing opens in the morning. We had a few regulars who would pop down every day, and my favorites were an elderly couple called Charlie and Lynn. They were both retired and suffered from ill health, and Lynn in particular would limp along with a cane. As she came in every day, I knew the particular sound of her walk quite well. She would limp in a specific way that was easy to recognize. So one day I'm opening up as usual, I'm setting up the coffee machine, and I have my back to the room. I hear Lynn's particular walk. The offbeat footsteps, the sharp clack of her cane. I didn't turn around, just called out a good morning over my shoulder, and let her know that I'd have her coffee ready in a few minutes and that Charlie's pint of piss water was already waiting for him on their table. As I'm saying it, I can see, reflected in the chrome panels of the coffee machine, the blurry shadow of a person walking behind me from right to left. But that was odd, because it wasn't the direction of her usual table. I turned around to ask if she needed something, and there was nobody there. Not a single other person but me. I damn near threw myself over the bar to see if there was someone crouched down behind it playing a joke on me, but there wasn't. Charlie and Lynn didn't turn up that day, and I was absolutely shitting myself thinking that it was going to turn out that she'd died and come to haunt the bar, but no. They came in as usual the next day and seemed completely normal. I've got no idea what actually happened. My best guess is it was just some kind of a hallucination, like my brain was filling in the things it expected to happen. Middle of the day on a weekend a few weeks after moving into my new house. Hear what I think is my neighbor banging very hard on my door. I make it downstairs, and no one is there. I had a shed across near my door originally, and the doors were wide open, which made no sense. I headed back inside as I was kind of shaken up, and a few minutes later I heard someone on my street. It was my neighbor talking to a police officer. So I headed out, and they told me there was a very large Native American guy with a face tattoo who had a baseball bat and was going door to door trying to open them up. He made it a few more houses down and tried banging on their door and was met with a bunch of people at the house, and he ran. All of a sudden the police officer got a call and flew off, and he returned a short time later. They found the guy next street over doing the same thing. I am just lucky it took me a bit to get down the stairs, as I have a bad heart, and it was what made it take longer than it should have to get down faster. I did some modeling for some local fitness centers when I was 17. I had to bring my own photographer. I ended up using this one guy I'd met through work, a customer who had an account with us. I worked in photo finishing at a company my dad managed. One particular modeling session was at 8 in the morning, so photographer guy said I could spend the night at his studio since I lived about 2 hours away. He hung out with me at the studio that evening. He kept asking me if I did drugs and how he could get me whatever I wanted. Found that a bit odd. The fact he kept bringing it up. He suggested at some point we shoot some partial nude shots, and I stupidly obliged. Mainly because I'd done some nude posing for art students, I figured this probably was about the same. About 2 hours into it, he wants to pose nude with me, with the cam set up on a timer. Gave me some bullshit about contrast of colors. I'm a pale redhead, he's a black guy. I'm like, no, I'm tired, I have to be up early, maybe some other time. He backs off, says he'll bring me breakfast when he comes to pick me up in the morning. He leaves. I'd been getting unnerved the longer I was around him. The studio was starting to creep me out. I was just getting more and more creeped out and started getting a bad feeling. I decided I was going to snoop through some of his portfolios of clients. The first ones are pretty normal, glamour shots, some models, nothing weird. Then I found a bunch of folders in a box in a closet he stored props and backgrounds in. Tons and tons of pictures of very young girls, naked. From age 6 to about 13. And he was in the pics naked with some of them, but you could never see his face. He'd have it turned away or covered. These girls looked petrified for the most part, but some looked drugged and just not there. My brain was going a mile a minute, his constant offers of drugs started to make sense. The only thing I couldn't figure out was why me? Because I wasn't a little kid. Then it struck me that my physique could be considered very young looking. I was short, freckled, super skinny, and basically had no tits whatsoever. I freaked out and called my ex-boyfriend, another guy friend, and about 3 co-workers I was friends with. They all converged on the studio within the hour. I showed them the pics. Then we packed them all away and put them back. We gathered my stuff, and we left. I stayed with a co-worker, and he drove me to my shoot the next morning. My ex-boyfriend shows up to have my back in case things get weird. The photographer creep shows up late and furious I'd left without warning. He says he showed up at the studio at 4 a.m., which alarmed me, because why the hell would he show up when I would be sleeping? Guy proceeds to have an attitude the entire shoot, is sabotaging everything, and keeps making veiled threats, and the owner of the fitness center was losing patience with him. And me, I had to pull the guy aside and tell him what was going on, why my ex was there watching the whole thing and glowering at the photographer, and then about the secret box of naked kid pics. I told him about the drug offers and how he wanted to do nude pics with me. I did not tell him I'd done nude pics. Guy makes me stay in his office, gets my ex in there too, and tells us to stay in there and not come out. He gets the photographer in another room and has an employee stall him in there. He called my dad. Then he called the police. My dad got there first. He was understandably pissed off, he'd known this guy for years through work. He'd even suggested him as my photographer. Cops show up, take a statement from me and my ex, and I tell them where to find the box of pics. I don't know what exactly happened that day in regard to the photographer and police, but they did arrest him, and I suppose they had to get a warrant to search his studio. It always pissed me off I never found out what happened with those kids in the photographs. If their parents had dropped them off for normal photos and then it went the way it did, or if the kids were kidnapped and forced into it. Also, it has always bothered me that the creep showed up at 4 a.m. when I would have been sleeping. Like, what was he planning to do? I have an older home, and 3 years after I purchased it, I had the original windows replaced. They had the weights in the wall. Anyway, that weekend after the windows were replaced, I was in the kitchen making breakfast, and I heard a thunk sound in the living room and then an odd metal rocking in the wood floor sound. I walked to the door between the 2 rooms and saw a brass lamp in the opposite corner rocking back and forth. I walked and grabbed it, and when I got it stopped, I couldn't make it rock like it was. Fast forward to that night. I was having a hard time sleeping and got up to use the bathroom. When I got to the hallway, I felt cold air billowing out from my bedroom doorway. There wasn't like a visible cloud, but it felt like a big cold presence. I quickly said a little prayer of protection, turned out the light, and made a mad dash back into my room, shutting the door firmly behind me. I curled up in bed to try to go back to sleep, and I distinctly felt someone or something poke me right in the chest over my heart. Needless to say, it wasn't a very restful night, and the next day I opened up the windows and saged the entire house. In 6th grade, I was at the mall with my grandparents. We stopped browsing so that I could use the restroom, This wasn't a multi-stall/urinal restroom. It was one of those single-person restrooms where you can lock the door behind you. It was down a hallway that shot off of the main mall corridor, so most people in the mall wouldn't have been able to see the restroom door unless they were walking directly past the front of the hallway or sitting on the bench that was positioned in a way that it offered a view down the hallway. I did my business, came out of the restroom, and there was a man standing fairly close to the door. I made eye contact with him as my grandmother, who was sitting on the aforementioned bench, called out and waved to me that they were ready to go. Upon hearing my grandmother's voice, the man appeared startled and jumped a bit, then ran away. As he was running away, his pants were slightly falling down, and he was carrying his belt in his hands. Why he would have taken off his belt, and been standing so close to the door while I was alone in the restroom, and why he was so startled when he realized that an adult was watching, I'll never know. But it has always stayed with me and always scared me. I was at a bar with my best friend and his brother, and there was this dude there, maybe 6 and kind of built? Not a bodybuilder or anything, but definitely strong. Let's call him Bill because I don't remember his fucking name. He was super friendly, so Bestie decided we would all go with him to another bar he knew. We piled into an Uber, and shit immediately started to go south. He was giving the driver shit about something. The driver was Bengali, and somehow the driver mentioned he doesn't drink. Bill starts going on and on about how that's stupid, and I vaguely remember some culturally insensitive remark. We get to the bar, and there's a basement room. Bill has 2 or 3 more drinks, max, and he is getting way too fucked up way too fast. I mentioned at one point I'm bisexual, which later turned out to be a mistake because he starts asking to kiss each of us. Bestie's brother gets so uncomfortable, Bill seemed to want to pick on him in particular, so we manufactured an excuse for the brother to leave. So now it's me, my best friend, and this drunk guy who is a head taller than both of us. Bill pivots from wanting to kiss to wanting to fight. The bar staff didn't help us at all. Somehow we got him out of there, and now it's just us on the sidewalk, and Bill is getting increasingly belligerent and starts throwing his drink and then takes a swing at my friend, and misses. Somehow we get him to leave. We still called 911 because he was so fucked up that we thought he was going to pass out and die. The ambulance never found him. I was 17 and watched my aunt's house. She was on vacation. It was summer, and I and 2 friends were playing GTA when one of us noticed a boy passing by. The boy looked like a boy we helped out from time to time when his mom threw him out of the house, so it could have been him. The boy walked up the path in the direction of my aunt's house. Because it was dusk, we couldn't see if it really was him. But since it was only logical it was him, I walked up to the front door to open it, while one of my friends was still watching the boy to see if it really was this young friend of ours. Anyway, I opened the door, and there was no one there. In the meantime, my friend in the living room yelled, "And is it Hida?" I closed the door, walked back to the living room, and said, "No one was there." "Yeah, very funny," my mate said. "I saw someone walk in." First I thought he made a joke. But when he stood up and said he wouldn't stay any longer, I knew he was scared. Up till today we don't know what happened, but we know for sure our own part of the story is absolutely correct. The GTA we played was GTA 1, BTW. Back then, a banger. This will be mild compared to some others. We have sensors on all doors linked to our alarm system that make a chime noise every time a door opens. My husband was out of town, because of course, so I was home alone. At 3 a.m. I wake up thinking I hear the door chime. But I was in that foggy space of did I dream, or is it happening? Then I hear it again. I bolt up in bed and freeze listening to the house because I assume someone has broken in and is in the house. My 2 dogs are also awake and staring at the bedroom door. But they are not freaking out, so that calms me somewhat, but I'm still alert. Look, I may be white, but I'm not. Let's go investigate the Seuss noise white. I do get up and lock my bedroom door and wait, sitting in bed with a gun, trying to decide what to do. I basically am hoping that if someone has broken in, they just steal some stuff in the living room and leave. But I hear nothing. The house is silent, and the dogs are also chill, which makes me think no one is in the house. But I heard the door chime. Then I hear it again, and again and again in rapid succession. It's impossible for the door to open and close and open that fast. Turns out it was a sensor going bad, and it was glitching out. I did eventually leave my room and go check the system, and there was an error code. Turned off the alarm and slept with all the lights on because I was still freaked the fuck out. Some years ago my wife and I were renting a small house in a lousy part of town, and to say this area was active with crime would be an understatement. Despite this, we generally felt safe, especially because we lived next to a cop who was super friendly. Well, The cop's house accidentally caught fire and had to be repaired, so they temporarily moved out, and the restoration crew brought in one of those huge roll-away dumpsters into their driveway. This effectively blocked my view of the street in that direction. I had just picked up woodworking as a hobby and had dragged my table saw out into the driveway, and I was using hearing protection. I was doing my thing until it got pretty dark out, cleaned up my stuff, and called it a night. The next morning, I came to find out literally 30 yards or so past the dumpster a lady had been mugged and assaulted the night before, and there was a very high likelihood I was outside at the moment it was happening, but with the dumpster in the way, the sound of the saw, and my hearing protection, I didn't have a clue anything was happening. And this isn't getting into the arsons, drug deals gone bad, homicides, etc., that occurred in the 3 years we lived there. I was at a resort down south with my best friend, and we had just met some other friends we were drinking with. Their room was on the second floor, and the resort was motel style, stairs and entrances to rooms were outside. I remember making a comment about how unsafe and shaky the railing felt when we were having a drink outside their room. Later that night I was standing on the stairs waiting for everyone to finish up as we were going to the bar. I could see the room from where I was standing, and two of the guys were goofing around, and the next thing you know, the railing gives way and one of the guys falls from the second story. He broke his neck and back in multiple places and fractured his skull. That's not all. Later that year we were having drinks at a friend's college house. This house had a ton of people living in it and was massive. On the fourth story there was a balcony, and we were having some drinks on it, and it really gave me the creeps. I remember asking a friend what he thought would happen if the balcony gave way. I then avoided that balcony for the rest of the year. That summer I got a text from my friend that the new tenants were having a party, and sure enough, that balcony collapsed with several people on it. Surprisingly, no one died. The time I spent living with my ex at his aunt and uncle's house, I had several super creepy and downright terrifying things happen to me. They live in a nice neighborhood right on the outside of a major city and sort of smack dab in the hub of a smaller city. So on one side of their neighborhood was a strip of bars, gas stations, dollar stores, etc., and on the other side was a strip that had a popular mall, restaurants, department stores, etc. I was about 20 and working at one of the more popular restaurants as a hostess, and I had to walk to work. It was only about a 15 to 20 minute walk. I had some creepy interactions just working at the restaurant, like a customer who was some guy in at least his 40s was obsessed with me and was super nice but just gave off weird vibes. I had to have my manager tell him to leave me alone when he came in with a table of, like, other guys his age and told them I was his girlfriend. Another customer offered me a job at his company as his personal assistant and wanted to meet at a different restaurant to discuss the ins and outs of the job. I had told my ex's aunt and uncle about it and his mom, and they all told me to go for it, so I did, and while we did discuss the job and nothing weird, it was just throwing off red flags left and right, and when we left, he asked me if I had told anyone I was coming. I said, yeah, everyone knows and is very interested in finding out how it went. Nothing else happened, but I lied and told them that he decided I wasn't a good fit, and I flagged his emails so I couldn't receive them anymore. I quit shortly after that for what I'm about to tell you, so I never saw him again. This one was pretty bad but not the worst, definitely close to it though. A few times when I was walking home, this car would drive past me and slow down a little and then circle back around and do it again. I just ignored it, but one day they did it and turned around multiple times. And this was in the middle of the day in the really nice part of the neighborhood, but there was literally no traffic or other cars around for the entire walk. I got an awful feeling, and when they turned the corner, I ran, and they came back around the other way and sped up, so I cut through a yard, and luckily there was a family sitting outside across the street from me, close enough to make conversation with. So as the car pulled up, I called over to them and asked how they were, and the car stopped right in front of me with the passenger window down, but I didn't look or even acknowledge that they were there. I just continued making small talk with the people, and they sped off. I quit after that, and I didn't go out hardly at all unless it was straight into my ex's car. The big one was before the other car. I was walking home, again, in the middle of the day, in the same neighborhood, when a Range Rover passed me. They turned around and pulled in front of me in a driveway, kind of blocking the sidewalk. It was all blacked out with tinted windows, and it had California license plates. A young guy rolled down the window and started hitting on me and then asked if I had a pen so he could write down his number and give it to me. Now, like I said, I was in my 20s and stupid and naive. I grew up in the country, and I wasn't used to being hit on so blatantly. And some of the guys from work were sort of unabashedly straightforward, so I didn't really see the red flags. I told him I had a boyfriend, but he kept pushing and trying to get me to come with him so he could give me a ride home and I could put my number in his phone. I declined over and over, and he eventually gave up and drove away, But thinking about it later, he kept looking over his shoulder, and I thought maybe it was because he was nervous being parked in someone else's driveway, but I am absolutely sure there was someone in the back seat waiting to grab me if I got close enough. And thinking about it later, I'm absolutely sure he was a trafficker, and I would have never been seen again. I still get panicky when I think about it. When I lived in London as a teen, I was walking over a hill alongside heavy traffic, and a car door suddenly opened, and a man leapt out and grabbed my arm and started trying to drag me into his car, completely out of the blue. I remember his grip digging into my skin and me planting my feet firmly on the ground and pulling back. I don't think he expected me to be that strong. I remember just knowing I wanted anything but to be in that car with him. I have no idea why he thought it was a good idea to attempt this while stuck in heavy traffic. In general, I don't want to think about what his intentions were, and I'm glad I never found out. He released me when another occupant in his car yelled something to the effect of "Come on, it's not worth it," and the car stuck behind beeped, and someone in it yelled something like "What the fuck are you doing?" The traffic was moving forward a little, but the car's back door was still wide open, and the driver wasn't moving the car while he waited for this guy who grabbed me, holding up the traffic behind it. I think someone in the car behind even got out of their car to physically intervene, but I had tunnel vision, and I can't say that for certain. I was heading out to meet with a friend, but I immediately turned around and went home after this happened. I've long since moved from that area, but I was scared of going out alone for the longest time, and I absolutely never went near that hill to the point of taking long detours to avoid it. I tried to tell my parents what happened after I got home, but they didn't believe me and didn't think to check or memorize the number plate, unfortunately. I really wish I did, but I think I was too young to realize how useful that would have been. Either way, I really wish I reported this to the police, but I didn't for reasons I won't go into since this comment is long enough already. Not long after the first Ring movie came out on DVD, I watched it at my friend's house, then hung out for a while, then went home. Going home was a 1-mile drive down a straight, country-ass road in the middle of a pine forest. It was probably around 1 or 2 a.m. About halfway to my house, I saw something bright white, damn near glowing in the dark. As I got closer, I saw it was a young girl, I'd guess 15 at the absolute oldest, waving at me. Scared the fuck out of me, and I sped home, jumped out of my car, and ran in the house probably faster than I've ever moved in my life. Thinking about it later, I figure it was probably some young girl meeting up with some older guy, which is still creepy. Another time a friend was giving me a ride home, and we decided to stop at a little pavilion on a small lake about 3/4 of a mile from my house. It was probably 2:30 or 3 a.m. We were sitting there by the water for a little while, and she decided she wanted to go home. I told her I was going to hang out here for a bit longer and walk home later. Not long after she left, I was sitting there in basically complete darkness when it was probably some animal, but it sounded exactly like someone was walking up on me in the woods. I even swear I heard something being whispered. My phone came out with the flashlight on in record time, and I was waving it around saying, "It's cool, it's all cool. I'm heading home now, it's all cool." I walked the approximately 3/4 of a mile home backwards, waving my phone around and saying, "It's cool. I'm heading home, it's all cool." Seeing that young girl freaked the fuck out of me, but I was in a car and already heading away. This probable animal terrified me far more because I was on foot, in the dark, in a forest. If it was anything besides a squirrel, I'd have been fucked. It didn't really happen to me, but watching a sociopathic pastor use my sister as a pawn, and my mom to a lesser extent, in his and his wife's IRL game of The Sims was surreal. I could tell he was a skeeve from day one, and I was stepping away from the church anyways. But my sister and my mom were faithful, and these people were charming. They did try to drag me into their bullshit every now and then, and my mom and sister claimed that the church would help with whatever they were told I was going through, but I could always see right through them and the words they would put in other people's mouths. This all happened a decade ago, but my sister only reconciled with some previous church friends last month due to all the damage they did. Fortunately, the pastors were socially run out of town, aka, an actual pastor from a parent church saw what was going on and rescinded their fellowship. In the days of social media, this was enough to destroy their reputation, finally. So they skipped town to do it all over again in one of the Carolinas or something. They even tried to get my sister to go with them after they struggled to find support. Mike and Heather Mills, you all are snakes, and you'll always be found no matter how tall the grass gets. You'll never get back the power and control you felt while slinging crack, Mike. I was living in a flat with this dodgy downstairs apartment. Every single person in this flat, after living there for a few weeks, would start to crawl in and out of the window instead of using the door, and then something disturbing would happen to them. There was one girl who hung herself, followed by a man who was on the run and was arrested, followed by the grand finale of a man, which is featured in the story. So this man was red flags all over. He would be caught outside waving a catapult around, offering all kinds of substances to people, and inviting all kinds of weirdos into his flat. He also told me he has a cheap Xbox for sale that he stole from his sister and had to fight her for it. One day I saw a neighbor who said she saw this lad in town getting arrested, but he broke free and ran away. The police came and searched the whole block and found nothing. The next morning I came out of my flat, and all across the hallway were clothes. These were clothes I was storing in my little cupboard right outside the door, ready to donate. They were just thrown everywhere. I knew it must be him, so I phoned the police and told them. They came back and found nothing. I knew he was hiding somewhere, and I was so paranoid. It all blew over, and I forgot about it. A few weeks later I went in the shed downstairs to get my bike. Inside were cigarette ashes and ends all over the floor, men's clothes, half-eaten food, tons of beer cans, and the creepiest part was an Xbox with strands of long red hair hanging from the scotch tape holding the box together. Why my clothes? Why my shed? How did he lock the door when he was done? I still have no idea. They housed someone else a few months later, and he started crawling through the window after a few weeks of being in the flat. Then he was arrested for attacking his girlfriend. I lived in a rural area, so it was rare for us to have spontaneous visitors. I had neighbors close by but knew all of them since it was a small town. I was about 14-15, watching TV in the living room, and a man pulled into our driveway on his bike. I remember thinking it was weird, but it was a nice day, and sometimes we did have kids on the street ride their bikes through our driveway, so I brushed it off. He got off his bike and started to pet my cat and then wandered off to the side of my house where I could no longer see him. By this point I was fully freaked out, but again, I'm trying to rationalize because we did live in a farm town, so I thought maybe he's got the wrong address and is buying something from someone. I called my mom and sister and explained the situation. I'm not sure whether I didn't explain enough, I just didn't have the awareness I do now, they weren't taking it seriously, or why I navigated it this way. But I remember they reassured me not to worry, and it was likely what I thought, and they would be home soon. I took that call in my bathroom. By the time I got off the phone, I was back sitting on my living room couch. The man had come back to the front of my house, and very relaxed, stepped up into our front garden, pressed his face on our window, and looked directly at me where I was sitting on the couch. I literally froze and couldn't look at him. It was like I told myself if I froze, he wouldn't be able to see me, but obviously he did, so I looked over at him, and the only thing I could say was, "What are you doing?" In the moment this was terrifying. I thought I was going to die, but I kind of laughed thinking about my initial reaction because it almost played out like a comedy sketch. It actually set in and got really scary when I realized who he was. He started talking to me from the window, and to keep it short, I don't think he expected anyone to be home when he did this or was hoping to find my mom. He initially tried to tell me he stopped by and saw my nice cat and wanted to pet him. I think he could tell I wasn't buying it, so he eventually admitted he was a former co-worker of my mom and came by to look for her. Come to find out, this married man had a very creepy obsession with my mother and had been making advances toward her for a while. I learned after this incident that she once caught him watching her while she was sleeping in the woman's dorm at work. He left lingerie and other gifts in our mailbox, and he made her overall uncomfortable. She shut him down, had to report him to their supervisor, and I don't think he could accept no as an answer. She tried to tell his wife, but she did not take it well at all and got angry with her. I still don't even know to this day how she got him to leave her alone, but I know we moved away so he doesn't know where we live. Summer 2023, I was hospitalized for several months after a severe bout of diverticulitis, fully recovered now. I was stuck in a small hospital room alone, on my back with a massive surgical incision going down my entire abdomen. I couldn't even really turn on my side. I wake up very late at night one night, hearing the most gut-wrenching quiet sobbing I've ever heard in my life. The door to my room was always left open so nurses could hear me, but there was a thick curtain that could be drawn across the doorway to block out the light from the hallway. The curtain was closed, and the door was open. It sounded like someone was standing directly behind the curtain and just crying their heart out. It wasn't loud, attention-grabbing sobbing, but this awful kind of tired, hopeless cry. There were no free roaming patients on that floor, and I had no neighbors in the rooms on either side of me. The nurse station was a ways down the hall. I couldn't see anyone, and I couldn't move, given that I was still kind of split open from end to end. I didn't know what to do, so I put my mask back on and went back to sleep. I don't know why I didn't think to call a nurse, or say something, or whatever. The delightful amount of Dilaudid I was on at the time probably had something to do with how calm I was about it. I think I mostly just went, well, this is definitely the kind of place that attracts this kind of energy, and left it at that. But my creepy story is I was at the grocery store shopping, and this man seemingly kept ending up in all the same places of the store I was in. Didn't think too much of it at first. For context, it wasn't a super big store. I keep seeing him linger in the areas I'm in but keep moving on. Eventually he leaves his small hand basket he's using to shop on the ground. I didn't notice it at first and went to the area he left it in to grab something. When I did, he conveniently showed up and said he left his basket there but didn't really say anything, just kind of gestured to it. At this point, I'm getting suspicious that he's following me, so I call my boyfriend at the time. I tell him what's happening, but he's at work. He stays on the phone with me as long as he can until I feel safe enough. I see the guy go to checkout, and all he has is a small basket, and I have a full cart. I'm thinking now I should be in the clear since the guy's going to be leaving the store soon. I go up to checkout, he finishes before me and goes to leave the store. I see him get just outside the doors and stop and wait. So, now I'm like, okay, yeah, he's definitely following me. But still kind of try to brush it off, thinking maybe he's waiting for a ride. Everything was confirmed the moment I walked out of the store and he started walking to his car too. He actually waited for me to exit the store. Now I'm really creeped out. I call my BF again and tell him what's happening. I don't want this guy to see what car I'm driving and potentially follow me. So I waited for, like, a good 5 to 10 minutes by the cart return, and finally, after what felt like forever, he left. Thankfully, this story has a happy ending, and nothing happened. What was scary about the timing of it all was I kept seeing posts about sex traffickers being pretty active in the area I was in. Not only that, there were several posts in my town at that time about men following women in stores. Maybe it was just a creepy guy being weird. Or maybe I was really close to getting snatched. I'll never know. Back in December 2019, the cutter I was stationed on at the time was conducting a patrol just north of Hispaniola, Haiti/Dom Rep. It was a bright, full moon night, the sea state was calm, and the air was warm. A fellow shipmate and I were standing detainee watch over some drug smugglers we had caught a couple of days prior with a fellow watchstander on the flight deck facing towards the back of the ship. We were both having a hard time staying awake. He had basically crashed in a lawn chair we kept in the flight deck hangar, and I was leaning against the smokestack fighting the back of my eyelids. Suddenly, out of nowhere in the middle of the warm Caribbean night air, I got this weird feeling like I was being watched. My tiredness instantly disappeared, and I looked around the group of snoring smugglers that were asleep on the flight deck in front of me, thinking one of them had woken up and called out to use the bathroom. No one was awake, so I went to settle back into my relaxed stance when suddenly my eyes met this entity about 50 yards directly ahead of me at the back of the flight deck near the railing. It was about 10 feet tall, was draped in long, dark, flowing drapes, appeared to be hovering in place under the moonlit sky, had a dark pointed hood, and had two bright, burning, reddish-orange eyes where its face and eye sockets should have been. Imagine the ghost of Christmas yet to come from A Christmas Carol for visual aid. I went into instant freeze mode and felt like I couldn't move for about 3 minutes, as if this thing had locked me in a trance. Eventually, for whatever stupid reason, I was able to muster up some courage and started walking slowly towards it. Before I could get 5 steps in, this being slowly turned, floated across the flight deck, and then faded into the black of the night. I went back to my post and asked my fellow shipmate if they had just seen what I saw. Of course he didn't because he was asleep. I called up to the bridge of the ship to confirm if any of the crew had been on the flight deck in the last 5 minutes, and they said no one had been. Spent the rest of the mid-watch freaked out, but locked in, and went down to sleep after being relieved. It gets weirder. The next morning, I made my way up to the ship's combat center, where I worked, and one of my senior petty officers, 17 plus years spent at sea, could tell I was feeling restless. He asked me what was up, and I told him he wouldn't believe what I had seen last night. Before I could even start the story, this man says, "Let me guess, you saw," and proceeds to describe in detail down to the exact color of the entity's eyes. I sit there dumbfounded and just nod yes and ask how he knows. He says to me, "You saw Jumbie," and goes on to tell me that several other members had seen it around the ship in years past, i.e., a lookout felt a dark presence over their shoulder on the bridge wing, but when they turned, it disappeared. A mess cook was down collecting food from the dry stores, and when they flipped on a light, they saw this dark figure disappear around the corner, but only when we are sailing around Hispaniola. He goes on to tell me that Jumbie is a demonic spirit that haunts ships around the Caribbean islands, specifically Hispaniola, and tortures the crew in certain ways. Ironically, our ship ended up breaking down shortly after the occurrence, and we had to spend a week sitting pierside in Gitmo Bay awaiting parts before getting back underway, where we were run ragged with cases for the next 3 weeks before we could go home. We were able to Google it later, and sure enough, a few of the images that came up with the search matched fairly well with what I had seen the night before. I haven't had an encounter quite like that since, but the image of those burning reddish-orange eyes, pointed hood, and the flowing black drapes in the wind and moonlit has yet to escape my memory. It was a very small thing. I was fishing with my mom, and she suddenly said, "What is that?" I looked where she was pointing, over to our left where the bay curved out. There was what looked like a puff of dark gray smoke against the rest of the overcast sky, just above the dunes. We thought it was from a tractor, as there are a few very old diesel models that people in the area used to tow their boats across the sand to the upper harbor. But there were none around that day. Then it started moving. It's really hard to explain in text, but imagine, like, a puff of smoke fading out but then coming back in a sort of circle pattern. Not like where it's up and down, but back to forward, fading in and out, like it was getting closer and then further away. It did this for about a minute before fading completely. Mom and I both saw it, wondered what it was, and commented on how it was weird, then went back to fishing. But then when I brought it up later to tell her husband about it, she denied ever seeing it. I didn't describe it as some kind of supernatural thing. I didn't claim aliens or ghosts or whatever. I just retold a story that happened about 2 hours earlier. Mom refused to acknowledge it. She doesn't believe in anything remotely supernatural or ET. She rolls her eyes at the thought of those topics. This was such a randomly weird thing to see that I couldn't explain that we both saw and acknowledged it in the moment multiple times. But Mom suddenly said it didn't happen. It's such a nothing story, nothing happened then, and nothing probably ever will. But I don't know. It was just weird and creepy. About 10 years ago, I can't remember the exact year, but it was the year of the whole creepy/killer clown phenomenon that swept the US. My, now ex-boyfriend and I were up late one night and decided to go for a long walk, which we often like to do at night. It was about 3 a.m., and we were about a mile away from home, walking down the major road that we lived off of, with no one around since it's a pretty quiet suburban area. A car drove past us, came to a screeching halt, suddenly reversed down the road at a high rate of speed until they were a ways behind us, and parked in the center turn lane. My BF shouted, "Run!" Grabbed my arm and started bolting like a second before all of the doors of the car opened, and out jumped 4 guys in creepy clown masks waving baseball bats. One shouted, "Get back here!" And another shouted, "Get EM!" My BF eventually let go of my arm. I was holding him back because I was very out of shape and a cigarette smoker, and I could hear these guys gaining on me while I wheezed for air and started crying. We ended up cutting down the first side street we came across and running through backyards before we finally lost them. I still don't know WTF that was about, whether it was just a bunch of little shits just trying to scare us or people who actually had bad intentions, but the whole incident still haunts me. I was on vacation with my boyfriend at the time in the Dominican Republic. We were on the beach, and a man selling cigars approached us. My BF did buy some cigars, he moved on. It started to get later, and the vendors were starting to pack up, but there was a booth with a beautiful Larimar stone, and I promised a close friend I'd find a piece for her while I was there. We didn't have any more cash on us, so we went up to the room to get some, and my boyfriend didn't want to go back down to the beach, so I went down alone to buy the stone. The man selling cigars approached me again. He asked me to get him a cup of water from the resort, which I didn't think was terribly unreasonable because it was hot, though if I weren't so much of a pushover sometimes, I would have said no. I went to get him the water, and when I came back, he leaned in to try to kiss me. I was totally thrown. I was like, "Oh. No, thank you." And I booked it back to the room. What went through my head was probably unreasonable, but my brain told me that his intentions were not good, and that could have turned into an abduction. Everyone had packed up, no one was on the beach any longer. He could have just taken me, and no one would have seen a thing. He didn't want a glass of water, he was trying to get me into a situation. Did not leave my boyfriend's side the rest of the trip.